Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's craft chat. I'm Sage Brousseau, Director of Education at Fuller Craft Museum in Brockton, Massachusetts. Our mission at Fuller Craft is to provide meaningful discovery of contemporary craft through exhibitions, collections, education, and public programs. We're committed to challenging perceptions and building appreciation of the material world. Our purpose is to inspire, stimulate, and enrich an ever-expanding community. To learn more about our collections, exhibitions, and other upcoming virtual events, or to become a member, please check us out at fullercraft.org. And again, I'm so thankful to have all of you here today, plus our very special guest, Karen Smith, who I'm about to introduce you to. We are using the webinar format today, so you're welcome to add your questions to the Q&A using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And we're going to reserve some time at the end of this chat session to get to as many questions as we can. And let's get started. Welcome, Karen Smith. I'm going to introduce you by reading your bio. Karen Smith fabricates and custom makes wearable art and small sculpture in her studio in Oakland, California. Her primary mediums are sterling and fine silver, and her methods include fold forming, forging, soldering, stone setting, and more. Primarily a self-taught artist, Karen has recently studied with a master goldsmith in Dakar, Senegal. She's also an arts educator and has created a program to teach this artistry and vocation to young women and girls of African descent who may not otherwise have access or opportunity. Inspired by time in West Africa and the isolation of being the only woman metalsmith around, and by the incredulous faces of girls and women who would look awestruck at her as she worked. In 2019, she created We Wield the Hammer in Oakland and is headed, the saying goes in Dakar, women don't wield the hammer. She's going to tell us a little bit more about that.
Hi, Sage. Thank you for having me. The saying in Dakar is that women don't wield the hammer. And that's why I felt compelled to name this organization We Wield the Hammer, because indeed we do.
Yes, we do.
We do indeed.
All of us do. I love it. I'm definitely going to ask you more about that, but I would love to start by asking you a little bit to tell us about you as an artist, as a metalsmith artist, and what your work is like.
Well, I started out making jewelry, beaded jewelry, in fact, and then my ideas sort of grew, my vision grew, and what I wanted to create grew beyond what I could do with beads. And it's funny because there are so many extraordinary things you could do with beads. And what I now know is that beading just wasn't my medium, right? And so then I learned wire wrapping, and then I learned soldering, and then, and then it just went on from there. And, I consider myself a student still. I am formally educated, but not in art. And so there's this thing that I still have that, well, I wasn't formally trained. And so, that thing that comes along with the elitism of what it means to be formally trained.
Yeah, I think that's something that kind of comes along with craft artisanship, is that so many craft artists learn from being an apprentice or working alongside another craftsperson, and not necessarily, in higher education or formal education. Yeah, and I think that's really been a stigma that I think that I don't share, I don't agree with, and I think that at the museum we're really working diligently to try and dispel that kind of a feeling. Yeah,
I think it's really important because, again, I have, personally, I have that push-pull dynamic because, I have great reverence for formal education, right? But I have extraordinary reverence for apprenticeships and, and traditional learning, because that's traditional methods of learning. And so I've had personally that little push-pull within myself. And it's also what propelled me to create this program, right? Because not everyone is interested in going to college, right? Not everyone is interested in, getting a BFA or an MFA. Not everyone knows that you can do that, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, I really appreciate and want to continue the tradition of hand to hand training.
So this is just a glimpse kind of at We Wield the Hammer, um, sort of like the hands at work. I like those detailed shots. So tell us a little bit more about the program.
So the program is an 8-week program that trains young women and girls of African descent in the fundamentals of fabrication. And we work with copper, we work with brass, and we work with silver. And so they learn how to file, they learn how to solder, they learn the fundamentals, excuse me, of metalsmithing. And and then when they're done with my program, we get them apprenticeships, or we get them, other connections to further their desires. If they're interested, for instance, in becoming bench jewelers, or if they're interested in something like CAD design. Like, we don't do CAD design, we do old-fashioned metalsmith training.
Mhm.
And so people often think of it like a series of workshops, but it's an actual training program.
Yeah, I love the idea that you learn the basics, and then you take those skills and you can apply it to CAD. You can apply it to whatever the next level you want to take it to is. That's definitely how mentorship and apprenticeship is successful. I think that's awesome. So I want to know more about this trip to Senegal, and how you got inspired to create the program from that experience.
The trip to Senegal, it's really it's really an interesting story. One day I got asked to make gold wedding bands. My favorite thing to make is wedding bands, but I don't do it that often. My favorite thing to make is wedding bands because I love,
Oh,
not particularly care about wedding bands. I just love being a part of that circle. But I got asked to create wedding bands for a customer, a client, and they wanted white gold, and I had never worked in white gold before. And so I quoted them, and I said yes, of course, and I quoted them a price. And then when I went to bed that night, I heard a voice say, "You know, you need to go to Senegal. You're going to spend your birthday in Senegal." And I was like, "Okay." I was tired, like whatever. And then the next day, after I was like trying to figure out all the details, I realized that I had completely undersold the process to him, because I had not worked in gold before, right? And of course, you can't go back and say, "Oh, I should have charged you double," right? Like, you can't do that. And so I was like, "Okay, well, this is a learning experience," because it was. And then you know a voice literally said, "You're going to go and study with a goldsmith." And so I was like, "Okay." So then I reached out to a friend of mine who said, "Oh, that's a great idea." First, I tried to like Google it, right? Like Google schools and Google apprentice program, all that, nothing. So I
mm,
reached out to a friend who reached out to a bunch of friends. And, one of the people, basically gave me, he was like, "You can't get it on Google because that's not how it works. Like, transmission goes from father to son to son."
mm.
Those people on that original call reached out because they knew people in Senegal, and they got me an apprenticeship with a master goldsmith. And I went and I studied for 6 weeks. And during the time I was there, I think originally he thought I wanted to just come and, sort of do some groovy Instagram, make a pair of earrings kind of. I don't believe that he understood that I actually do this work. And so after a couple of weeks, he was like, "You can't leave. You have to stay." And I was, I can't stay. I have to go home. Like, I'm here for 6 weeks and then I have to go home. He's like, that's not enough time. So I stayed for 6 weeks and then I came home for 4 and then I raised more money and then I went back for 6 months. And that's how I did it. And, but what used to happen is women and girls would walk by the shop, and especially the little ones, they would just stare. And there was one little girl in particular who I would say hello to this child in 4 different languages. And she never speak. She would just stare. And I asked my teacher's son, I was like, why won't this kid talk to me? Kids like me, right? I'm an educator. And he's like, she thinks you're a ghost. I was like, why would she think I'm a ghost? She sees me every single day. He's like, right, but she's never seen a woman do what you do. Like, you have fire and you have hammers, and she's never seen that.
Wow.
And exactly. And I was like, but she's been seeing me do it every day for months now. He was like, right, but she's been only seeing you do it. She hasn't seen any other woman do it. And I thought, now that she's seen me do it, if she wants to do it, who's going to teach her? And that's how the program started.
Wow.
Because representation is important.
Yes.
Once you see somebody who looks like you doing something, you know that you can do it, and then you can desire it. And literally, that's how the program started.
That's incredible. If you can see it, you can be it. That's one of my favorite little phrases.
It's absolute truth.
Now, I know you've got hands in many pots and things are changing, but I'd love to know a little bit. I know everyone with COVID, everything has been upended by COVID. Everyone is feeling that. But what has been the impact? Like, it's really, I'd love to hear more about how the program, was received in Oakland and what the students really took away from it. What was the impact thus far?
So the program was received very well. The program is always received well. People go, this is amazing. We think that this is a great program. And so I was lucky enough to have the program incubate at the Crucible, which is an industrial arts school here in Oakland. And I am actually on their faculty in the jewelry department. So I was lucky enough to have the program incubate there. And it was very well received. But the Crucible is a school that has many, many classes and courses and workshops and, team bills. And I mean, they're a really super busy place, and the kind of time that we needed, because we're not a series of workshops, we are a training program. Like, they just couldn't give us the kind of time we needed. And so so we were there from January, through January through 2019 and 2020. And our winter session ended last March, the Friday before it closed down for COVID, right? Like, we literally had our exhibition that night and then it closed down.
Yeah.
COVID. And so we started looking for our own studio space last summer. But COVID has impacted us in a lot of ways. Like, things were shut down, and in-person learning was a challenge. Things have opened up again in some way, but the cost of living here in Oakland is astronomical. And so finding affordable light industrial space has been a super, super challenge. And we're still looking, but that's why we have been on hiatus. And, so COVID has kind of been the catalyst for that. And we are absolutely ready to open again. We have students who went through the program once who want to go through and sharpen their skills. We have students who are interested in pursuing an apprenticeship or something like that. We have other students who are interested in going through the program. So, my background is not nonprofit. So it's sort of been a learning curve for me. Like, fundraising and development is just not my forte. And I have spent a huge amount of time trying to get us in front of people who can support us. We have been doing non-traditional fundraising because COVID has impacted corporate giving, has, foundations and all kinds of things like that. And so just in order to be able to get up and running, we have to raise money. And so COVID has impacted us in those ways, and we are absolutely ready.
I want to circle back for just a minute about your own art practice. And I read somewhere that your metalwork practice has shifted from jewelry to a fine art context. And I wanted to know if you could tell us more about that.
Yeah. So when I first started making jewelry, it was, pretty simple. And then it just got more elaborate. Like my brain just has more elaborate, more detailed, and larger and larger and larger ideas. And so I just started creating those. And so, in the beginning, I used to wear hoops all the time. Now, these are my signature earrings, and they are forged and fold formed. And I mean, like, I don't know if you can see them, but they are wearable art. They're not simply jewelry. And so, I do larger and larger and larger pieces. Because it's just, I feel like, and this goes back to the formal training versus the the self-taught thing. I feel like these things are coming out of me, and they just have to happen, and I don't know sometimes how I'm going to make them happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I know I see this thing and it has to happen.
And it's like an evolution.
It is like evolution.
Can you talk a little bit about the different techniques they use? I'm not sure if everyone is completely familiar with fold forming and soldering and all that. And I'd love to know a little bit too about the students when they first approach, like using a torch. What that's like for them.
So my favorite thing is working with young women for many, many, many reasons. Mm-hmm. Because I think that it always inevitably, Sage, I have young women who go, I can't, they're all afraid of the torch. Mm-hmm. And I was afraid of the torch, right? Yeah. Because it's fire. I'm going to burn myself, and what I love so much is like they are afraid of the saw because they think they're going to cut themselves. They are afraid of the hammer because they think they're going to smash their finger. And they're afraid of the torch because they think they're going to burn themselves. And I have literally had a student melt down because the first time she tried to use the saw, it didn't work. And I was like, of course it works. Right. And she was like, it doesn't work. And she just had this meltdown. I'll let her have the meltdown. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, are we willing to start again? And then I was like, we have to practice this. Young people, I think, especially I guess they're Gen Z, they have this thing where everything has to be perfect. When they do it the first time, or else they can't. And I don't understand where that comes from, but like, I feel like it's my job to combat it. Right. And I use humor, and I use humor and tough love, because nothing is Instagram ready. From the beginning. We all have to practice. And so this kid had this young woman had a meltdown because the saw didn't work. And by the end of the class, after, I practiced, I showed her again how to start with the saw and how to practice. By the end of the class, she was helping the person sitting next to her. She was like, no, you have the wrong angle. And when the class was over, I said, so I thought the saw didn't work. And she was like, I know, that was crazy, huh? I was like,
yeah.
And she was just great.
Yeah.
another student, we were working on forging with a hammer, and she hit her thumb, and she didn't even hit it hard, right? But she hit her thumb, and she was like, "Oh my God, I hit my thumb." And I said, "Okay."
Mhm.
And she said, "But I hit my thumb." I said, "Okay." I said, "Do you need to go to the hospital?" And she was like, "Well, no, but and I was like, "Do you need a bandage?" And I said, and she was like, "Well, no." And I said, "Okay, so then what?" And so she was like, "Oh, you know, I mean, I think um, young girls and women, we are afraid of hurting ourselves. I mean, I didn't learn how to ride a bike until I was 13. And I never tell the story, but I didn't learn how to ride a bike until I was 13 years old because I was afraid of falling,
Yep.
you know. And
Yep.
the first time I got on a bike, I friggin' rode the bike, right? Like it was no thing. And the first time I fell, I just fell,
Yeah.
you know.
I Yeah, what's that saying? I think it's from like Alice in Wonderland where it's like, what if what if I fall or something? And it's like, well, what if you I wish I knew the quote, but it's like, well, what if you don't? What if you fly instead of fall, right?
Exactly. And that's what I do with my students all the time. What if I burn myself? I said, and I always go, okay, so what if you burn yourself? Well, then I will be burned. I was like, and then if you're burned, so like take it all the way out to deal with that fear so we can get on about the business of teaching you this skill.
Yeah.
And, um, and when they leave the program, whether or not when they're done with the 8 weeks, they have created something extraordinary or they have just created something, what they have done is transformed their fears.
Exactly. That's amazing. We're getting some requests to see your artwork. Would it be okay if I shared your website?
Yeah, so you see, the mask making is sort of my thing right now.
Oh, okay. I see it.
And it was really, it was inspired by my time in Dakar.
Mm-hmm.
So next to, if you scroll back down, right next to Chadwick Boseman on the right, that's a sculptural piece that I did that was on exhibit at the Richmond Arts Center last year.
Awesome. Beautiful. So that's like a neck piece and then it hangs down.
Is 4 feet long, and it is a ceremonial piece. Yes,
Oh, look at you next to it. Yeah, that's huge. I
yeah,
love it.
yes, that's me.
Cool. Very cool. So I'm just gonna put up your handle is Karen_Smith metal artist on Instagram. If you
Yes.
want to check that out. So tell us a little bit about the different techniques that you use. Do you have a favorite technique or a signature technique?
So I guess my signature technique is forging because I love textured metal. I love texturing metal. I love the way the light plays in metal that has been textured.
Hmm.
So I like texturing things with hammers, with um, a rolling mill. Like I just love texture.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Fold forming is exactly what it sounds like. It's folding metal and then forming it into a shape. And it's one of my signature techniques. Like these mask earrings that are my signature, they are fold formed and then forged. And then they have eyes soldered on. Um, you asked me about techniques, didn't you?
Yep, you
Solder-
answered it.
Soldering is when you use heat to join two pieces of metal. And so yes, that is one of the things that when you use the torch with heat to join metal. And so fabrication is creating all these things by hand.
Mhm.
A lot of things that you see, a lot of times jewelry is cast, which means there's a mold made and you pour the metal in, and there goes your piece, you unmold the piece. Fabrication is doing it all from scratch. And it's it's what I do. And when I went to Dakar to learn traditional techniques, I mean, I literally learned how to do things, how to do this work like they've been doing it for the last 100, 200, 300 years, right? And it is backbreaking work. And so I sort of combine the techniques. I don't draw my own wire anymore. I mean, I don't draw my own wire, but I know how to do that. So yeah, does that answer your question?
It does. It does. Um, yeah, I'm just curious to know a little bit more about, well, and because I'm sure people might want to know a little bit about how the pieces actually come together physically. I think it's really interesting to see the work. But I think a lot of people don't really know how metal is shaped and turned into jewelry.
So metal is shaped, it is formed in various ways.
Mm.
Um, uh, for instance, let's take these earrings. Okay, can we see these?
Mm-hmm.
These are gold. They are 18 karat gold plus sterling and fine silver, right? So this is wire, obviously, and this is sheet, right? And so what you do is you have to use the saw to cut what you need. You form it um, in various ways, sometimes using a particular tool, sometimes not. Um, to make texture, you use hammers. I used my favorite hammer to make this texture because this is my favorite texture. And then you shape the ear wire. I actually use a pencil to shape the ear wire, but some people create a jig or, what have you. And so, it's really, it's like so many other crafts. I think that people think about metalwork as something that it's not,
Mm-hmm.
because you do it with fire.
Mm-hmm.
But in the same way that quilling works, you know, the way, you shape that paper
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's extraordinary, right? To me. But to people who do quilling, they just use their little tool and spin the paper.
Yeah. Can I tell you the first time when I learned how to shape an earring wire, it was so liberating. I was like, I can make all the earrings now. Like I have the power to do it. It was really like, because I just thought it was like, the thing you had to go to the craft store to buy to put it on the thing and make it an earring. But like learning how to make it, I was like, oh, all right.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, people do think that that it's a big deal, and because you can go to the jewelry store or the craft store and buy, and you're like, oh, and then you're like, well, if they made it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's literally how I have sort of lived my life. If this person can do it, I can do it. If it's something that I'm interested in, right? Like I could not be president because I'm not interested in that.
Yeah, no, totally. So tell us a little bit more about your journey becoming an artist. Have you always considered yourself an artist, or is it something you came to later?
Well, no, actually, it's really funny. Um, I have always considered myself an artist, and when I was a child, I performed. I was a dancer, and I was trained, and I was an actor. And then when I got ready to go to college, and I'm the first generation of my family to go to college. My mother was like, okay, all that was nice, but now you have to get a real job and you have to go to school to study something
Mhm.
that will get you a real job. And so
Mhm.
I put down my art forms, and I was always writing, I was always doing things on the side, but I didn't come back to art until I got divorced. And I'm a Buddhist. And when I got married, a friend of mine had created a special mala for our ceremony. And, I came across it as I was, as we were going through the divorce, and I wanted to toss it. And I thought, no, you can't toss this, right? And so I took it apart and remade it. And it was really beautiful. And so people started saying, oh, make a mala for me. So I started making all these malas. And then people said, oh, make jewelry. That's how I started with beaded work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have only been living as an artist and calling myself an artist for the last 10 years. And I haven't been serious about it except probably the last 5. Because like there was kind of a stigma for me that I had to overcome.
You mentioned that you started, your entry point into jewelry was beading. Who did you learn metalsmithing from?
I taught myself metalsmithing.
Oh,
So,
completely self-taught. Wow.
well, because I so I had a friend who taught me how to wire wrap,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, showed me how to wire wrap,
Mm-hmm.
and like go home and practice that. So I was like, okay. So I went home and practiced it, and because I'm an academic, or I'm a former academic, my first instinct is to get a book, right? And so I got a book, and I started looking at it, and I was like, wait, the way she showed me how to wire wrap is not correct. It's just the way she does it, right? And so, and then when I was looking at the book, I thought, oh, this is easier for me if I do it like this. So then I got another book, and then I subscribed to a magazine, and then I started looking at videos. And when I wanted to learn bezel setting. Bezel setting is when you set a stone. And it's really, really challenging if you don't understand the process, right? And so I took a class with Joe Silvera. Joe Silvera has a jewelry school here in the Bay Area. And it was a 4-part class, and I missed the first part because I had a family emergency. So I missed the first week. And then the second week came along and I was behind and I never quite caught up, right? He showed me the basics of what he had gone through, but he showed me the basics in 10 minutes. And I was so insecure that I was not going to get it. So I went through the class with him and I asked a lot of questions. And then I came home and I got another book. And then I just practiced and practiced and practiced. And it is still the thing that I feel the most insecure about. But as you see, when you look on my website and you look on my Instagram, I set things all the time, right? But it's the thing that I feel the most nervous about, because I feel like I gotta stop and a start and a stop and a start instead of, and I'm really learning how to let go of this notion of formalized
Mm-hmm.
work, uh, 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 education. I'm really learning to let go of that. And it still comes up, obviously.
Yeah, I think that's a real familiar struggle for many of us who consider ourselves artists or want to consider ourselves artists, but don't allow ourselves to go there.
Right.
Um,
And it's
it's
why, I'm sorry, but it's also why every one of my students, when they leave the program, they leave with Tim McCrate's book, The Complete Method. And, I have been building a library with extraordinary books um, that are not only instructional, but inspirational. Right. And so, like, because I think that that's really important. I'm never going to let go um, of learning and researching, but it doesn't have to be formalized. Um, and so instruction comes in many forms. And I always want my students and anybody that I engage with to, if they feel like they haven't learned or they haven't gotten it, they have methods to continue the process.
Yeah, we're always a student, I think. I mean, that's what I like to believe. I want to encourage anyone else watching to enter some questions in the last few minutes that we have together. I have a question here for you. Who have been your champions as you've developed as an artist? Who inspires you or who encourages you?
You know, I belong to a group of other Black women metal artists. Um, and we totally lift each other up.
Mm.
But I am supported and encouraged so much by other metal artists. They encourage the work that I do with We Will the Hammer. They completely 100% support the program. They've donated. We've gotten, so many donations from the metalsmith community. It's extraordinary, and that's where we get our biggest support. And I am most inspired by the young women that come through the program.
Mm.
I'm most inspired by them because I watch them put down fear. And, I still live with fear. I still live with anxiety because I'm human, right? And watching them, it's like, I know that it's possible to get through to the next thing. I remember that it's possible to get through the next thing. Because once you conquer a fear that you have, you can sometimes forget, how challenging it can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I really like about being an educator as well, as that I'm always learning from
Always.
students, always. Um, so besides, your library of books, do you have, and well, I guess you kind of answered this, like, so you have the group of other metal artists that you belong to, that you are a part of. So are those people you turn to when you have a challenging situation in your craft? Do you have any other go-tos that are your sort of helper?
I reach out to other metal artists, right? When I'm having difficulty,
Mm.
uh, I absolutely reach out to other metal artists. And this is what I love about that community. We support each other 100%, right? With the program, we teach the fundamentals of fabrication, and so there's no difficulty in that. Like I developed a curriculum, and so that runs amazingly smoothly. The hardest part is the fundraising to get the doors open or to keep the doors open. But within the program itself, I'm happy to say that what I have created is really, really great.
Yeah, it seems really special. Do you have any websites or recommendations for someone who's interested in metalworking besides your own, of course?
Well, I mean, it depends. I don't know that I would recommend a website. I always recommend a book,
Hmm.
right? Tim McGrath's book, The Complete Metalsmith, is like a Bible. But there are groups on Facebook that do all kinds of I guess teaching,
Hmm.
or not teaching, but they sort of work on things together.
Yeah.
And there are people on YouTube who have free classes, like free work, and then there are people who have paid workshops. So I would say, depending on who you are, if you just have a cursory interest, look at your local beat store. There are always workshops, and you can check them out. And they are great. Once we get our studio up and running, we're going to also have workshops, because I have to tell you, Sage, the people who ask me the most for classes are women who are 40 and above. They're like, well, I want to join this program. I would like this program. I would like to learn. And what I've learned is, because a lot of women, who are 40, 50, they are at, they're at a crossroads, right? Like they want to learn a new hobby, or they want to learn a skill for a second stream of income. Some people retire and they think, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I've always been interested in this. And so, like, I'm trying to shape a program around that age group.
Mhm.
But in the meantime, I also offer some workshops, with some cold connection with working with metal without fire,
Right.
as well as with fire. Um, so yeah, I think starting with your local bead store is a really good thing, and scouring YouTube. Like, there's so many things that you will see that will pop up.
Yeah. It's a rich resource. We are going to have to wrap up in a second or two. I wanted to I want to ask you, what's next? What's next for We Wield the Hammer? What's next for you?
What's next for We Will the Hammer is we are going to, and this is a surprise, Sage, but we are going to be opening up a second chapter in Durham, North Carolina this summer. And we're actually looking for space there because Durham is a community that is still committed to arts education, and artists is still fairly affordable. And so we are going to be opening a chapter there. So stay tuned for that. And as far as I am concerned, I want to get back to the practice of my own work. And so We Will the Hammer is looking to hire a development person, so that I don't have to do all the fundraising.
Mhm.
And we're looking to hire a deputy director.
Fantastic.
That is going to be coming down the pike really soon. So that's what's next. So it's a lot. But I want to get back to my own work. I haven't been making very much. And I find like I've been having crazy withdrawal. I think even though my life is super, super full right now, and a little bit crazy with the move and, with all the things that I'm doing, I feel like I could have a little bit more joy if I could make. Like, that's where the joy comes in.
I just pulled up your website again so everyone can check out wewieldthehammer.org if they want to learn more.
Mhm.
And I want to thank you again for joining us today. It's a busy, crazy time, and we're all looking forward to hopefully rejoining the world again post COVID.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you. And if anyone out there isn't familiar with us, we're Fuller Craft Museum, located in Brockton, Massachusetts, and you can check us out at fullercraft.org, where we have lots of information about our upcoming programs, events, and exhibitions. So see you again on Craft Chat.